Good evening and thank you for watching this edition of Northwest Newsweek. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization has identified 4 areas in and around Ignace that may be suitable for burying Canada's spent nuclear fuel. The organization was in Ignace for 2 days, telling the community what to expect over the coming year. John Thompson reports.
Twin-engine aircraft will cut 100-meter ribbons across the sky over Ignace this winter, conducting aerial surveys of 10 to 15-kilometer zones where Canada might bury its nuclear waste. Geologists will walk the land in the spring and drill holes through the summer, searching for a 2 by 3-kilometer rock base that will be strong enough to hold the waste forever. 15 communities are engaged in the early phases, including Nipigon, Hornpain, and Blind River. Ignace and Schreiber are the furthest along in the second phase of Step 3 over a 9-step process. NWMO spokesperson Patrick Dalsetti expects that phase will take 3 to 4 years.
There is potential for the community to continue in the process, both as far as the land and the geology and meeting those technical requirements, as well as the community engagement and social buy-in that is needed for the project. But really, it's early days. That's the main thing. Again, Ignace, one of 15 communities. There's a long way to go, but the preliminary research shows that there's potential to continue, and so now Ignace has decided to continue into the next phase of preliminary assessment.
Nearly 70 people of Ignace's 1,000-resident population attended the sessions on Wednesday and Thursday. Mayor Lee Kennard says while the proposal has both proponents and detractors, he's interested in letting the process play out to determine if Ignace is the best site option.
It's really not a lot to do. Just stay open-minded and let them do their studies and see if it is feasible or not.
In the near future, the NWMO intends to narrow the selection to 2 communities for 5-year intensive studies. It hopes a repository will be operational by 2035. John Thompson, TBT News.
On the heels of the 2014 federal budget, the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs met with the Chamber of Commerce in Thunder Bay. Bernard Valcourt's speech outlined a number of topics, specifically focusing on the recent proposed changes to the First Nations Education Act. Courtney Rutherford reports.
Federal Minister of Aboriginal Affairs Bernard Valcourt was in Thunder Bay to discuss the newly released 2014 federal budget and to promote the benefits of proposed changes to the First Nations Education Act.
Budget has confirmed the way forward agreed to with the Assembly of First Nations to develop a statute, a piece of legislation that will create a legislative framework that will give First Nations control of education on their reserve. So I think that this will prove transformational, and I think Canada will benefit from this greatly.
Valcourt says the $1.9 billion in First Nation elementary and secondary school funding will provide opportunities that will help change the outlook for many young people living on reserves. The current education system has resulted in outcomes that are drastically below the national average. Anishinaabe Nation Grand Chief Harvey Esno sat down with Valcourt today and told him that Nan communities are currently 12 years behind when it comes to building schools.
We don't have libraries, we can't attract the kind of teachers that will stay in the north, with a good benefit plan and so on, so we've become, a revolving door of teacher graduates, and then we move on to bigger schools.
In his speech, Valcourt said he believes that First Nations across Canada deserve access to a school system with the structures and supports that are available for non-First Nation students. He believes that First Nations taking control of their Education Act will be good for Canadians and the future of our country. Courtney Rutherford, TBT News.
A new OPP commissioner has been appointed to replace Chris Lewis. It's Vince Hawks, who's been serving as Deputy Commissioner of Field Operations for the Provincial Police Force. Hawks has served in a series of senior positions after joining the force in 1984. Lewis steps down on March 28th after a 35-year career, and Hawks takes over the job the very next day. Well, most of Lake Superior is still frozen over, but that's not stopping Terrace Bay from dreaming of summer. Waterfront improvement has been discussed since 1972, but Terrace Bay has now released the plan's very first blueprints, showcasing 6 vibrant backdrops of commercial and residential development. The municipality has placed bids on portions of the 26 kilometers of lakefront property, particularly along its harbor and golf course. Terrace Bay's 2009 strategic plan called for identifying tourism as a future economic driver. Mayor Judy Davis says partnerships now need to be developed with Parks Canada, the Ministry of Natural Resources, and private developers.
Developing commercial potential. I think if we decide to go ahead and we get the funding partners to developing the first stages of marina, developing a breakwater and that sort of stuff to help the marina start off is critical. And then we could slowly develop those opportunities in the future. It takes a number of years to develop.
Davis anticipates the economic engine of a developed waterfront would encourage niche tourism like kayaking, fishing, and tours through the Slate Islands and the old ghost town of Jackfish. A new report from the Ontario Chamber of Commerce says the Ring of Fire could generate $10 billion and sustain 5,500 jobs in the first decade of development. The provincial business lobby says it's time the entire province takes notice of the Ring of Fire, not just the north. Dennis Ward has more.
The Ontario Chamber of Commerce is urging the federal and provincial governments to fund a plan to build infrastructure to the Ring of Fire development. The report released Thursday says $25 billion in economic activity will be generated in the first 32 years of the development, but a lack of adequate infrastructure is a significant barrier. Thunder Bay Chamber President Charlotte Robinson says the two orders of government need to get together.
What's the infrastructure going to be? What's the plan to put it in place and start moving forward on that? And I think that the Development Corporation is starting that discussion, so that's positive, but we need to make sure that that continues to move forward as expeditiously as possible.
Ontario Mining Minister Michael Gravel says the first and most important decision is deciding the best power and transportation corridor. He feels the federal government has to be at the table.
The Premier certainly has made it clear that we expect the federal government to be an equal partner, particularly as we move forward on the establishment of the Development Corporation, and Minister Rickford and I will certainly be continuing our discussions in that regard.
But Greg Rickford says the Development Corporation is still a work in progress, and the federal government will look at it when more information is available. Rickford says the right decisions need to be made.
We want to ensure that power corridors, access to extraction sites by First Nations communities that are remote and isolated are identified as part of the logical and common sense approach to moving forward with the Ring of Fire. Government and previous ministers have maybe put the cart before the horse in terms of announcing the location of the smelting plant in Sudbury. That may have set up a discussion around infrastructure that was a bit premature.
While politicians are still determining their level of involvement, the Ontario Chamber looks to broaden the conversation about the Ring of Fire. They believe if more people know about the Ontario-wide economic benefits, things will move a little quicker. Dennis Ward, TBT News.
The Ontario New Democrats want to know how much the province is paying Deloitte LLP to establish the Ring of Fire Development Corporation. NDP Northern Development critic Mike Mantha went after Minister Michael Gravel on the issue. Mantha says his party has been unable to get any answers about that corporation, and he calls it a smokescreen to disguise the lack of concrete action in the Ring of Fire.
Hiring Deloitte is an admission that the government never had a plan for Ring of Fire development in the first place. Will this government stop giving out consultant contracts to outside firms and do its job by coming up with a serious plan for Ring of Fire development instead of wasting another 5 years?
Thank you. We know that in terms of the project moving forward, we've got to be able to get the resources out of the Ring of Fire and obviously to market. That's why that's so important. And we also, working with our potential partners, certainly including industry, First Nations, and potentially the federal government, hopefully, we recognize that we want to move forward with the kind of expertise that Deloitte can provide to us. They have the governance expertise, they have the legal expertise to be able to pull this together in terms of making the decision on infrastructure.
The head of the Ontario Prospectors Association says 2013 will go down as one of the worst years for exploration he has ever seen. At one time, the province was the #1 jurisdiction in the country, but it's now fallen to the middle of the pack. But as Dennis Ward reports, Ontario's mining minister remains upbeat.
Just purely slow out there. There's a lot of people looking for work.
Ontario Prospectors Association Executive Director Gary Clark says he's never seen anything like it. Just a few years ago, total exploration and development in the province hit $1 billion, $450 million of that in exploration alone. Clark says that number dropped in half last year.
And you can see it, like you go around and talk to some of the diamond drilling companies that run out of Thunder Bay, or even the ones that work around northwestern Ontario, and they're down to running, one machine instead of 6 drills and things like that. And you can just take that and multiply it in to how many people you don't have working. And it hurts.
But Mining Minister Michael Gravel feels Ontario continues to remain the top jurisdiction in the country for exploration, although a recent survey of the mining sector now puts us in the middle of the pack. While he acknowledges there are some challenges with commodity prices, Gravel feels Ontario remains very attractive.
The facts are that indeed mineral exploration continues to be, extremely solid here in the province of Ontario. We continue to have a significant amount of exploration dollars being spent, and we are seeing new mines opening up in the province of Ontario.
Uncertainty with First Nation consultation and disputed land claims are a growing concern for some in the industry, but there is no doubt commodity prices have money for exploration drying up globally. Clark says that has a trickle-down effect on mines opening too. Of the 13 mines touted to fire up in the region in the coming years, he feels only 4 will go ahead.
And that's just normal. You take out the ones that were marginal to begin with. That'll probably go sometime in the future when the prices get high enough. But they're going to sit in the bank basically, and are there ready to go forward if and when the commodity prices get up.
Dennis Ward, TBT News.
As municipal leaders head to the Good Roads Conference in Toronto next week, changes to highways in the region have been moving forward. That story plus sports infrastructure in Kenora when we return. Minister of Transportation Glenn Murray says the province is considering canceling privatized contracts for highway maintenance in northwestern Ontario. Any action on the file would have to wait until next winter, but his comments came only weeks after several contractors were fined for inadequate highway maintenance in the region. Highway 105 between Vermilion Bay and Red Lake and Highway 502 between Fort Frances and Dryden are now being reviewed for reclassification. That follows protests in Vermilion Bay and the Iron Range Bus Company refusing to travel on 502. Dryden Councillor Mary Trist was among those calling for greater attention to be paid to the highways.
The number of vehicles that travel back and forth on that highway between Dryden and Fort Frances and even into the States has just been very scary. I myself have even used that road quite concerned, four-wheel drive the entire way. I just think given the amount of traffic, especially during the winter that travels up and down that highway, something needed to be done. It just was not safe.
Minister Murray has personally apologized to the people of the Northwest for the state of the highways this winter. Volunteers in Kenora have converted a seasonal indoor skating rink into an indoor soccer field, and imaginations are already beginning to run toward the next goal. The Kenora Indoor Sportsplex recently opened to the public. The hockey boards and glass of the J&M Arena have been removed, and the ice was replaced with a $120,000 AstroTurf carpet. The work was done entirely through volunteer labor with local contractors. City Recreation Programmer Megan DeRuard says she knew soccer would be the foundation of the new facility because of the heavy summer use at Kenora's outdoor soccer pitches. In the next few years, she foresees frisbee, rugby, lacrosse, and gymnastics taking place at the Sportsplex.
There's lots of things to do in Kenora, but you need different venues, you need different opportunities, you need variety for people that don't just do hockey or don't just do soccer or don't just do CrossFit or don't just do working out. They need something else. And, you know, the more that we can bring, the more that means that Kenora's population is going to continue to grow, their economic development is going to continue to grow.
Within 5 years, there are hopes to add volleyball and basketball, and she envisions a destination site that could attract tournaments to Kenora. Well, another recreation project is stirring in Kenora. It's a multi-million-dollar infrastructure dream that would combine sports and culture. The target, expanding the Kenora Recreation Center. The proposed expansion to the rec center will add a second regulation ice surface and could include a 500-seat auditorium. The four options range from $17 million to the suggested model, estimated at $25 million. The cultural community in Kenora has been pushing for art space since 2007 and is regarded as a key stakeholder in the rec center's expansion. Although the consultant's report warns of lost opportunities if the expansion is deferred, Kenora Mayor Dave Canfield insists the idea will fall into the hands of the next council, which will be elected this fall.
We have not said we're building an event center, and I think we clarified that at the committee of the whole meeting today. We're going through the process, and at the end of the process, it will tell us whether we need it and whether we can afford it. And at the end of the day, the decision of the council of the day will have to make a decision on whether the needs are there, whether you can afford it, and give the public all the information so they know, okay, if we build this facility and it's going to up your taxes 5%, do you still want the facility?
The report says operational costs to the taxpayer can be minimized with what it calls aggressive programming, but it also concedes that capital funding support from senior levels of government are essential if the expansion is to take place. When we return, Pikangikum First Nation and the OPP launch a joint pilot program called Pilot Journey to improve the lives of youth in the remote community. Pikangikum First Nation has been chosen for an OPP pilot project aimed at turning the community's young people into positive role models and leaders. Project Journey was launched this week in an effort to improve the fortunes of the reserve near Red Lake, which has been plagued by suicide and negative media attention in recent years. Jonathan Wilson reports.
I guess I'm really excited about seeing, the impact that it's going to have with our children, with our youth in our community. Yeah?
Pikangikum Chief Patty Peters says after years of feeling sad about living in a community with a negative label attached to it, the youth will finally have some positive media attention so they can start to turn things around.
Instead of something, negatively being portrayed, telling that, these kids are gas sniffers, these kids are suicidal, these kids are uneducated, these kids don't have no future. But, that's wrong to say those kind of comments about, a community, about children and youth. Something positive should be said. These kids are great. These kids have a future. This is the future of our community.
Project Journey will involve the OPP, teachers, and the community at large, with the goal of preventing youth crime and reducing antisocial behavior by youth aged 6 to 18. OPP Superintendent Ron Van Stralen says the relationship between police and the Pikangikum youth will continue to improve, and the activities will be reflecting Aboriginal values.
They've done snowshoeing, there will be some sports activities, there will be programs within the school on leadership development. There'll be community projects where, they may be required or asked to, take on a cleaning project or, cut firewood for elders or just become, community leaders themselves and see what it takes to, help others.
Chief Peters says they've had other programs in Pikangikum over the years, but nothing of this magnitude, and he thinks the youth will embrace it.
When you start something like this, you're not going to really see immediate results, but I believe it's in the making. I believe there's going to be, a decline in child abuse, and children will be coming more regularly to school.
The Pikangikum option was one we'd been working on, like I said, since 2009, and one that we were the most passionate about. But there are other projects that will be on the way, I hope.
Over the next 5 years, funding for Project Journey will be provided by Public Safety Canada through the National Crime Prevention Centre and the Ontario Government through the OPP. Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
Students at Confederation College got some inspiration this week after watching a local documentary titled Ordinary Woman, Extraordinary Dream. The film follows Maggie Sophia, a quadriplegic, and her inspiring dream to return home to her isolated First Nation. Maggie Sophia grew up in the far north community of Summer Beaver. At the age of 11, she was paralyzed in a diving accident. Maggie and her family had to move to Thunder Bay as she required medical care and support that just wasn't available in her remote community. Her dream was to one day visit home, even though it seemed impossible with the lack of resources. Darren Wellington with Spinal Cord Injury Ontario was one of the support workers that accompanied Maggie on her journey. He says it can be challenging to live in remote communities when you have a disability, but as this film shows, anything is possible.
It's meant to be an inspirational film about overcoming adversity and still continuing to pursue your dreams, and also challenging the perception of disability and focusing on ability and the idea that you're still able to really achieve a lot of great things.
Person with disability, and I want to be a great example that you don't have to be not doing anything. You're still able to.
The screening of the film was followed by an interactive discussion involving the college students who said they were inspired after watching the film. Although Maggie's tragic accident is the central part of this film, there are also many other tragedies exposed, such as high suicide rates and other First Nation issues. Ordinary Woman, Extraordinary Dream is now available on DVD. Well, almost 500 sons and daughters have been lost to suicide in First Nations communities over the last 27 years. The Embrace Life is a forum to help young Aboriginal people network, seek help, and find the answers they need. Organizers of the two-day event held in Thunder Bay say one reason for the high suicidal rates in First Nation communities is the lack of available resources. This event provided many sources of help and answers. NAN Deputy Grand Chief Goyce Kakagamic says when a tragedy happens, it impacts the entire community.
it shakes the psychological foundation about well-being as a community. So that's what we're dealing with. And then we come together. What can we do then to add to this thing?
We have presenters, speakers, we have counselors available, and it's a way of finding yourself, finding help, and you get to know people.
The event also included workshops on grieving and trauma, art therapy, music, mentoring, and guest speakers who spoke about their own life experiences. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. See you again next time.